Hello and welcome to Signal Lantern, your beacon of freedom for the Northeast. Here with me today is Dr. Wyatt Hermansen. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Introduce yourselves to everyone.
Certainly. So yeah, my name is Wyatt Hermansen. I am an associate professor in the English department at Westfield State University, one of our fabulous state colleges here in the state of Massachusetts. And I mostly teach writing classes. I'm also really involved in early college efforts across the Commonwealth. And yeah, I love podcasts. I'm really interested in politics, history, the intersection of those two things, like Jason is. So that means that when we've worked together in the past, we've always had plenty to talk about. So
Yeah.
it was a real pleasure to work with Jason while he was a student at Westfield.
Yeah, and rhetoric is a huge thing too. I mean, straight from the first class that I was in with you, we were always talking about rhetoric and how to properly convey your messages and ideas.
Oh yes, I thank you for anytime I have a chance to talk about rhetoric. I'm delighted to. That was my main focus in English as an undergraduate and as a graduate student, was just studying public argument, which I've always been fascinated by since I was young. When I was young, and I remember the politicians as of my youth as I was growing up, just being fascinated by presidential speeches and debates and controversies, and I've just always thought it was just so interesting. And so yeah, that's definitely a big part of my life. I don't get to do it as much as I don't get to teach argument. you know I would love to be able to teach like classical rhetoric and medieval rhetoric, and
Aristotelian analysis.
yes, I would love to do that more often. But every once in a while I get to teach a class called persuasive communication, and I teach
Hmm.
it kind of like a classical rhetorical seminar. But I don't get to do that much these days, but I still from the sidelines like to do my armchair analysis, of course.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing is it's not necessarily something you have to explicitly teach. It's something you've demonstrated. And I mean, a bit of backstory of how we met is I was in your class, I think it was Comp 2,
Hmm.
fall semester 2022, and we were talking about final projects and the way you did it, explain a bit about that is like kind of dealer's choice, whatever the student wants.
Yeah, I really like so our program um is really focused on the writing program at our institution is really focused on real world writing. So real world genres, real world audiences, just because we believe that that better prepares students for not only college writing that they'll encounter in the rest of their time as college students, but also once they get out into the real world and they're doing whatever kind of communication they're doing in their different fields. So I kind of like to center the class around having a project wherein, as you just said, Jason, students can really choose to pursue whatever topic is interesting to them, as long as they can justify that there is some kind of conversation that they're entering about some pressing matter where their voice could make a difference, which is lots and lots of things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I love also having students have more options than just writing an essay, because let's be honest, there's not much of an audience for research essays outside of the institution. I mean, there just isn't. Like, no boss is ever going to ask you to write a 5 paragraph essay. It's just not going to happen. But you might have a boss who asks you to, write some kind of a report where you are discussing the need for a particular project, or for funding, or to communicate with some outside stakeholders. So, and Jason, you picked a podcast,
I
which
did the
is all
Brewster
coming full
call.
circle now.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
it's funny because I've had several YouTube channels and like I renamed one of them. It was like Cyberdelic 88, Gaming Wizard 101, and then it went to I think Captain Creativity, and then I started Jam and J for just my music. And then I
Right.
did the Brewster Call, where liberty lives at Harlem dies and commies need not apply, which was sort of my
Oh,
first
yes.
run at this. But now we're starting Signal Lantern, which
Yep.
is the de facto bully pulpit for the Keepers movement that I've begun.
Yep.
And we've spoken about that a few episodes ago. But yeah, side note, if anyone ever has me on the Jason Brewster show, either that's not me, I'm a Jim Carrey clone, or they're paying me a crap ton of money because I think the blank blank show as a format for podcast is just so overused. You're beating a dead horse, necromancing it, and then beating it again. So I wanted something that actually, louder with Crowder is nice. It's catchy. So Brewster Call. That's that's what
It's
I
a
did,
great
and
title.
maybe it needs a comeback. But it's one of those things where I can only wear so many hats at once. Uh,
Yes.
and so maybe in the future it becomes like a syndicated radio show. I have no clue. Uh, but what you're saying about presentations is interesting. I was thought about I remember seeing there was like a trend of like college kids getting together like as a fun thing, and they would like make presentations and call it like presentation night, and it would be like super absurd, either like hear me out or uh one I was a part of. It was a whole thing about size, right? And it talked about Robert Wadlow being like the tallest human being, but then sharks, and then planets, and then like VY Canis Majorius, and then the observable universe, and then multiverse theory, and then at the end it was like, so do aliens exist?
I love that idea. I love the fact that college students are getting together just to give presentations. That makes me incredibly happy. And it reminds me of I had a friend who had a PowerPoint presentation birthday party,
Oh, that's
and it was
fun.
surprisingly it was just it was incredible. And one attendee just brought like a totally straight faced, not intended to be funny, like history presentation about the history of the institution they'd attended, the college in Connecticut they'd attended, that was somehow hilarious. I don't know why it was so funny, but it was a blast. So of course I'm here for any of the public speaking
Well,
exercises. I
especially
just
if
think
you
it's
can add
amazing.
like really cool animations and like like I've kind of built a skill of becoming a master presentation maker, but I mean, from the start, what I had wanted to do was, oh, like I noticed that there's censorship in the way that media is presented, and at the time
Yep.
there was a um I think it was from The Intercept, and it was about the findings from a Supreme Court case, uh, or it was Biden versus Mississippi, or
Yep, I remember. Yep.
Missouri. It was Missouri. And the senator basically, they had findings where Facebook had created a page where the government could come in and say, hey, censor this, and they would.
Right.
And so I had approached you with my concerns like, hey, believe it or not, you left Texas because I assume progressive, but I'm like kind of in a reverse situation here. And I was nervous going into that conversation, but you approached it with grace, and didn't make me feel ostracized for my beliefs, and you're one of my closest confidants at college.
I really appreciate that, Jason. And that means a lot to me also. And interestingly too, when you're talking about my reasons for leaving Texas, I actually applied for jobs all over the place. I was truly heartbroken to leave my home state.
Hmm.
I really loved it there, and it's also, I think that it's a beautiful thing to live in a world where we can all have some sort of common values and have different, I think, just different ways of wanting to achieve those goals, right? And so I've always been really open to listening to other sides of argument. Like I remember I had a friend growing up who was very, very conservative, and I didn't really find my footing. I don't know. I honestly don't know if I will ever fully find my
Always a
full
political
footing.
outcast, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but and I remember we talked about having, these were in the days where the only forum for something like this was AM talk radio. And so we talked about, my friend Miles and I talked about having an AM radio show where we would kind of do like a red state, blue state, like have conversations. And
Hey, that's a
I've
good
always just thought
podcast
those,
idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like a proto podcast. Exactly. Which we never ended up doing, but also we were like 13 years old. So it kind of it makes sense. I don't know. I
Yeah.
can imagine they wouldn't want to green light such a thing, but and that would only work. And it would honestly probably not be very exciting to listen to anyway, because even then we could find common ground on so many
Well, I
things.
guess that's the thing is because division and separation gets more clicks. But like
Yes.
honestly, though ostensibly you and I probably, if we were to go down the list of political viewpoints, we're probably like in disagreement about a lot of them. But I view you more as a sense of commonality because the way we conduct ourselves, the way we do debate, I've never felt like it's been a heated argument. Always a discussion, always open.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if we get to a point where we can no longer do that as a country, then we are really in very deep trouble.
Yeah.
And I think you know, when I was looking at jobs and looking at places where I was looking to, you know, there are not very many tenure track jobs in English, but this is 10 years ago. There weren't very many then either. And I interviewed at a couple of places in this area, but I interviewed at the University of Alabama at Huntsville. I was at the University of Arkansas at the time, and you know, honestly, this being in the South around people who are mostly more conservative is what felt more familiar to me. And it was also such a different atmosphere to be someone who, you know, there were certain issues that I felt, you know, more strongly about than others. For example, growing up, I don't know how I developed an interest in this topic. I don't, but you know, I guess in Texas you couldn't really escape it. But I decided pretty early on, informed by some of my own kind of like religious beliefs and just my own understanding of the issue, that I was really opposed to the death penalty.
Hmm.
And it just became something that I was really interested in, and I got involved with, and I was interested in research, and
Me
I
too.
applied for this job at an organization called the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, and that was really interesting for me because it was, you know, there were points where we could find commonality with people in that issue all across the political spectrum. There was this group called Murder Victims Families for Reconciliation that was a death penalty, an anti-death penalty group that would reach out to people who had lost loved ones in awful circumstances but weren't pursuing the death penalty for the person who had killed the person that they loved. And it was just a really, that was kind of the only real activism stuff I did in Texas, and even then I didn't do very much of it. But then I moved up here, and you know, I found such a different world where it's mostly here kind of just one infighting within the left.
No, but I mean, arguably, I would say even the Republicans are infighting. I think honestly, it's a symptom of New England as a whole. I've said, you know, national organizations have trouble making inroads because, for lack of a better term, we're kind of xenophobic, where it's like, you know, someone from Texas who lives in Texas and is just coming up to door knock, knocks on the door. It's like, hey, get off my lawn. There's a
Yeah,
value of having something by New Englanders for New Englanders, which
yeah. What do you that's what do you see as being the what kind of infighting is there? Would you say in conservative circles in Massachusetts?
have you followed the gubernatorial race, the primaries between Mike Minogue, Brian Shortsleeve, and Mike Kennelly?
No, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. All I know is just that it seems that even people that I know who are sort of more on the left or more progressive, or it seems like everybody is just like, let's get Maura Healey out. I just keep there doesn't seem to be a lot of love
Well,
for her.
that's a good thing for the right, but I mean, I've noticed, like I said, the left more generally, and we've discussed this, is that it seems like there is sort of a at least recently, like this monolithic of if you have to agree with all these policy positions, and if not, you're a Nazi and you're out of here. Where there seems to be some intellectual diversity, where like you know libertarians and people are all sort of in this broad coalition, right umbrella, which is what you would expect out of you know the left in like the '60s.
Right.
Um, but specifically in Massachusetts, I mean, I've been following this gubernatorial race, and Mike Keneally and Brian Shortsleeve are both attacking Mike Minogue because he refuses to debate, but
Mm.
he's, you know, like super far ahead of them, and
Oh,
isn't wanting to debate until after the convention. Um, because at this point, and I was just at an event a few days ago, he was like, not him directly, but one of his campaign people is like, listen, all that the other two have to attack him on um, is the fact that he hasn't really gone out to debate because he's a lot more focused on actually talking to the people rather than the
Right.
infighting. And furthermore, the only debate people care about is Minogue versus Maura Healey.
Right. Right.
And it was actually a really funny thing happened. So I was 2 days ago, I was at a campaign event in Worcester where he came. And one thing he said, he was talking about education and that there are these national scholarships programs that basically your tax dollars will stay in the state and then go towards funding children's education. But the
Right.
only thing is that the governor of the state has to opt in. And
Oh,
so
wow.
he said, listen, the only reason Maura Healey is refusing to do all of this is because of partisan politics, where he doesn't like or she doesn't like Trump, and so she's kind of refusing to do that, even though there are objectively good things that could happen if she does opt in. And he says, what I will do is if Maura Healey decides to opt in, I will cut her campaign a maximum donation check and then still run against her and beat her in November.
That's really, you know what? I That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess
As a
that's a
fan of
huge
gamesmanship. Yeah.
no, but that's also another thing is it seems that people are a lot like the people who don't get it are a lot more focused on national things. Like I
Yes.
can tell you that Mora is going to be like, "Oh, I'm not Trump. I'm not Trump," and she's going to be running against Trump in this cycle, even though it's not even the case.
Right.
And the people who really get it are the people who are focusing on like state level stuff.
I just saw her. Did you see? I saw that she was trading jabs with the governor of New Hampshire.
Oh yeah, that was a whole thing, like live free and be dumb or something.
Yeah. Like what? Yeah. And it's
Everyone's
like
trading
there's
jobs with
something.
everyone. I don't understand it. I mean, the sort of conversation that we're having that we've always had is the type of thing that I want to reinvigorate in my dealings with being a nonprofit founder and bringing back, constitution. And so talk about that. Talk about free speech and how important it is, not just in principle but in practice.
Well, I will say, you just made, and I promise I'll come back
Okay,
to,
the
I'll get
weave.
there. I'll get there from here. But I saw this video. It was just like some silly. I think it might have even been Don Lemon interviewing people on the street or something on Instagram. And he said, he was talking to these three people, and he was basically like, do you support the war in Iran? It was like these like college age young men.
Hmm.
And this one guy was like, no, I don't support it. And the Don Lemon, who I think it was Don Lemon, was like, well, why? And he was like, I don't know. I just think that it's not the right thing. And his friend was like, well, I do support it. But neither one of them could say why. And then the third guy was like, you know what? I don't know anything about the war. And like, F the news, like
Yeah, at least
get
that third guy's
keywords.
honest.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, exactly. So I was like, this can't be. I know I did not very elegantly recall that story, but I was like, here are three people, none of whom are capable of supporting their position on a very important topic with any kind of clarity at all. And that is more troubling to me than anything else. That I think civic education is virtually non existent. And I think that should worry everyone, because I worry that we are just slowly losing our democracy to technocrats and to internet algorithms and AI, and it's really troubling to me. Not to And I don't really know enough about it to to rail against specific actors, but I do know, and I don't think it's a partisan thing, and I don't think that our declining level of interest in politics, and I've talked to you about this before, and this is part of why I support free speech. I was not a college student. Well, I guess it was kind of a long time ago. I was a college student at the University of Texas from 2002 to 2006.
I was born
And
in 2002, Wyatt.
I know. Oh, that. Oh my God. I think. Okay, now my neck.
No,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
my
I'm
strength
sorry.
goes crick in my neck, and it's the age. And now
No,
I'm
it's
noticing
okay.
on
It's
camera
hey,
all my
hey, hey,
gray
hey.
hair.
At least you're not 79 years old.
That's true.
My opponent for town moderator is 79 years old.
Really? Oh well, then you are bringing youthful experience into the realm.
You saw my launch
Um,
video, right?
which I thought your launch video was fantastic. I hope that all of your listeners have watched it because it's fantastic, and I can't
The
wait to ask you
most
about how
previous
that's going.
episode was about that. Yeah.
You're very talented at short video messaging, and I think that's a really like increasingly marketable skill. Like honestly, that is, if nothing else, like you have the ability to pack a real thoughtful punch in that short period of time. And I think that's a really really good skill to have
Well,
communication
yeah. I
wise.
mean,
But
a human. I think there was a thing that said like our attention spans now collectively as humans are shorter than the attention span of a goldfish.
oh my god,
I think someone actually like did the data and studies and said on average, like if you take this age demographic of like 18 to 25, like it is statistically provable that they have a lower attention span than goldfish.
oh my god. I remember it used to be that, it was like the average length of time that somebody would wait for a video to load back in the days when you had to wait. It was like 7 seconds or something. I was like, oh, nobody's waiting 7 seconds. That's like half an hour in today's time. Nobody's waiting 7 seconds for something to load. Just scroll right
Six or
past
seven.
it.
No, I'm sorry.
Um, but I when I was in college, it was a constant. The whole West Mall area of UT, it stretched from the big clock tower, the main building, to the main drag near campus, which was Guadalupe Street. And there were just every single day tables with different political positions, the college liberals, the college socialists, the college republicans club. The I remember one of the last days that I was one of my last semesters at UT, there was the college republicans set up this like affirmative action bake sale where it
I
was
think
like
you
a
told me
cookie
about
cost.
that.
Right? Yeah, cookie cost like a certain amount if you were white, and like it cost less if you were a person of color. And there were probably more people protesting it than there were actually participating in it. But that's just college, right? But there were like a variety of voices on that in that area that I would walk past and not usually engage with, but I would watch with interest every day of going to college. And so then when I went to grad school, I went to a very politically disengaged grad school, two politically disengaged campuses, and then came to Westfield State, where it was, where I now teach, that was extremely politically
Yeah,
disengaged.
until me.
Right, until Jason, yes. But I think that it is good for everyone for there to be a, plurality of different perspectives represented in college, because I think it's good to understand what different sides of conversations are, also so that you can just kind of, not just so that you can be a more invested, educated citizen of the world, but also so that when you do encounter ideas out in the real world that are on the other side, it's not shockingly offensive to you to the point that you don't know how to engage with it, right? So I
Hmm.
just think it's good, kind of like exposure therapy, to understand that there are going to be people that have all kinds of different opinions, and I think it's really important for, you know lots of different kinds of speech to be protected on college campuses, as they are everywhere else, almost everywhere else. And so encroachments on free speech bother me, no matter no matter
Hmm.
what the motivation is or what side of the political aisle they come from. And I think it's one of the coolest things about our country that, it's even thinking about things like proposed bans on, or like, I think that one time Trump floated prison sentences for people who burn the American flag. Now, I understand the idea, like, I totally understand the emotional shock and revulsion that one might feel if someone is burning an American flag, especially if you have, served in the armed services, or you have family members who served in the armed services. Like, it feels like a slap in the face, and it is. But I've also just, I think it's so unbelievably cool that we live in a place where you can do that, where the protections for free speech are so strong that you can burn the flag of your country, and that is protected as free speech. I think that's a much cooler principle than, just protecting something just for the heck of it. Because then I think if you have that protection of that sort of iconography, then it just feels to me like it's creeping in the opposite direction of where it should be,
Oh
even though I
yeah.
really do understand. And it's offensive to me. I don't necessarily like it. I wouldn't burn an American flag. I don't see a reason to do
Well,
that.
the
But
only reason I can see to burn the American flag is when you're retiring it. There's a specific ceremony. The whole thing is like if a flag has touched the ground, and it's like or tattered and beaten or well used and well loved, you can go to the American Legion and there's like drop boxes for this. But
mm,
specifically, what they do is it's more of a reverent, like, we are burning this flag, uh, as a sign of respect. It has done its service, but that's an entirely different end than burning it in protest. It's
right,
almost
that
like,
is, yes.
I mean, people like hang the flag upside down as a symbol of distress too.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And I think and of course I think in Vietnam it was a big form of protest, like burn your draft card. There have been protests where people have burned constitutions, and people have done that, by the way, on that doesn't really know a political side either. It's not just people on the left who have done, flag burning or really dramatic, demonstrations against American iconography. There have been people on the extreme kind of like religious right who have done that. Not to, I'm not
Yeah,
codifying any position as extreme, but like it's just, to me, I think, a very like, and I just feel like it's been defended by the
no,
Supreme
yeah,
Court, and
settled
is
precedent.
clearly, yeah, and it's tough. I know, like, it's tough to deal with, but that is such an important principle. And I really do believe in it. And I think that's, that ties all the way back to when you wanted to discuss your project. And I know that I am not necessarily like, I understand that there are, even colleagues of mine who don't necessarily agree with me about the free speech on campus idea, because I think they believe, if I wanted to fairly kind of steelman their position, they believe that it's too big of a disruption to learning if ideas are so flagrantly offensive to particular groups that those particular groups feels that they're being attacked, right?
Hmm.
So, and I understand intellectually, I do understand that position. But I think that that is just a sign that, it has to come from students, I think, who say, I don't agree with these positions. That's a famous Voltaire thing, right? Like, I don't
But I'll
necessarily
defend
agree
your
with.
right to the death to defend. Although Timcast did come out with another thing, that there are certain people who they don't believe in free speech, and so he posited a addition to that of like, um, I may not agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the right your death. Uh, Defend to my death your right to say it, so long as you also believe in free speech.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And in fact, one of my favorite things to do there's a couple of favorite things that I really like to do when having a discussion with someone that I don't necessarily agree with. So the first is, I don't mean, I don't practice this as often as, because I don't really debate with people that much these days. I wish I did, because I just love
More
it. It's so much fun. But
conversation.
yeah, more of a conversation. But one important thing I think to do is, Socrates had this called this process elenchus, Elenchus, where he said, it's impossible to have a productive debate or conversation even unless you both agree upon the definition of terms that you're using.
Yeah, that's a
So if
huge
I
thing.
am talking about abortion and I mean access to reproductive health care, and you're talking about abortion and you mean the unjustified killing of a human being, it's impossible for us to have a conversation on those terms. So we
Hmm.
would have to have, and this is why abortion is such a hard one, I think, because you have to be able to agree on what it even is that you're talking about. And so when you have a philosophical difference so great that makes the gap really hard to bridge, but it's still worth trying to do it. And so, I think that a really important part of having these conversations is, okay, well, what do we mean by free speech? What do we mean by protecting free speech? Where do we draw the line on where do we draw the line on where free speech should begin and end? And
Yeah.
what is considered hateful or hurtful or harmful speech and what isn't? And at the very least, that requires a longer conversation, I think, right? Than just saying we don't like that. Let's stop it from happening. Do you know this? Have you ever heard of? I think I've talked to you about it before, but have you heard of Loki's wager?
Loki's wager. I've heard of Pascal's
Uh,
wager. All right, explain Loki's wager to me.
I was going to say, I wonder if they're similar, but so Loki's wager is, so the Norse
Yeah,
trickster god
yeah, of
Loki
course,
who's
Marvel.
always doing, right, always up to shenanigans. So
Hmm.
he makes a bet with someone and he wagers his head. And so Loki loses the bet, and this guy who comes to collect his head. And Loki says, okay, wait. I'll give you my head. Deal's a deal. But you're not entitled to any of my neck. I only said my head. So we can discuss this, but you need to figure out where you think my head begins and my neck ends. And if you can figure that out, you can take my head, but you are not allowed to take any of my neck. And so, of course, what this ends up with is that nobody they cannot agree on where the neck ends and the head begins. So Loki keeps his head, right?
It's
So
interesting.
the whole idea is that if you insist to an unreasonable degree that we can't define something or we can't agree on something, then it's impossible for us to discuss it,
Yeah, and I
right?
think part of that's a deliberate tactic where people will be redefining words in order to do something. And
Yes.
make discussion impossible. I did want to mention something I've noticed. Earlier, you were saying about people burning the Constitution, and then you were saying, oh, it's not on the left, or it could be on both the left and the right. But I want to posit something to you that perhaps, at least I've noticed, and maybe you have too, that there seems to be an attack on these fundamentally apolitical things, things that or ought not to be political, like the Constitution itself or
Hmm.
free speech as a right. Um, and people trying to turn that and be like, oh, that's a right wing nut job thing, the Constitution of the United States. And it's like, what?
Yeah,
Flip on
I think
that.
we can't, I think it would be a very bad idea I think that's just an ultimate example of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Mm,
And we should not, I don't think, I think people on the left should really not cede the idea of patriotism or these critical founding philosophical positions of our country, like liberalism and free speech and all of those things. I think that's a big mistake. But I know what you mean. I mean, I've definitely heard argument. This is kind of what your senior honors project kind of touched
yeah,
on, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
I mean, what do you think these days? What do you think about, like, do you think that do you think that it would help the left to more more openly espouse a sense of patriotism and national pride, or do you think it's just
Absolutely. I think that that is a certain thing that ought to connect all Americans together. And I would believe that the fundamental assault on these apolitical things and saying, oh, if you're patriotism, you're somehow a bigot or you're somehow attacking that is alienating a certain amount of the population by
Mhm.
default. I would like you to diagnose a little bit, Dr. Wyatt Hermansen,
Oh no.
and try to diagnose why exactly do you think free speech is on the decline? You've talked about at college how there's this political disengagement, but even stepping back from that, I just feel like people don't talk to each other anymore. What gives?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's actually a really good. I mean, that's certainly what I've observed. Do you? I mean, definitely. Well, that's a good question. I mean, do you think that there is, maybe you're more in these circles, maybe you don't see the same lack of political engagement among like people your age that I'm seeing. Do you think that there is, like, do
I
you think
think
that
I
you're
think there's this. I mean, the circles I am in are not a good representation of the general population. I would say that what you've observed is a lot more common. Whereas for me, I'm specifically in activist circles of people who have already been activated and engaged towards a common goal, no matter what that goal is. And so the
yeah.
people I'm talking to are sort of the outliers in this data set.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think you know, it is hard to say, but especially this is another problem. And one of the things that I, you know, begrudge social media for the most,
Yeah.
I think that the algorithmic bubbles are so powerful now that I genuinely feel like there are entire universes of conversation that I just don't know are happening. Because I mean, it used to be, I mean, you remember when Facebook first rolled out, you saw everybody's everything just in order. There was
I
no
mean,
sorting.
you have to take an active, principled stance in engaging with ideas that you personally disagree with, and
Yes,
like make that an active practice in order to even get any headway. Because if you're just casually, just doom scrolling, the algorithm's going to feed you more of what you're already thinking.
that's exactly right. And that I think is, because I remember telling you, I have been so fascinated by politics and by political debate and political discussion. That's why as I was growing up and even well into my teens and 20s, I was constantly listening to right-wing talk radio. I mean, constantly, because there was no left-wing talk radio. I mean, there was Air America for a minute there, but like, I'm sorry, nobody listened to
Well, and
nobody
I
listened to
remember
that.
one time you told me that you went through an Alex Jones phase, and I was just
Oh
floored.
yeah.
I'm like, wait, what?
Absolutely. Absolutely, like, I would listen to, Glenn Beck, to Michael Savage, to, oh, what was her name? She had a show in the mornings, Laura Ingram, Rush Limbaugh. I called into Michael Malice, or not Michael Malice, Michael Savage's show a couple
Huh?
times.
That's
And I
funny.
remember it was because there wasn't like, I was just in my car a lot, and as I was driving, I didn't really want to listen to music. I wanted to listen to people discuss ideas, and there weren't really podcasts then. So that's
Mm,
what I listened to. And I vehemently disagreed with about 90% of it, but I really enjoyed hearing people's reasons for believing the way that they do. And I think that it gave me a huge advantage when I would go into spaces where I felt like I could talk to people and reach them on a certain level,
yeah.
because like I understood what they were concerned about. And also I grew up with my dad was like a very he'd had a very interesting life. He grew up with, his father had gone to federal prison, and so he really had to
Whoa,
like,
lore
he had
drop.
he
Holy
owned car
cow! I
dealerships
had
and
I had
got
no clue.
I didn't know this about my dad until after my dad passed away. None of us
Oh,
knew. So he was growing up. His dad owned car dealerships, and he'd been involved in some scheme around transporting cars between places and messing with odometers and something. And he, went to federal prison. And so my dad kind of raised his sisters, and then put himself through law school. He was the first person to go to college in the family. Put himself
wow.
through law school and he was a very ethical, very principled person. And he was also very, independent politically. Like, I saw him vote. His voting would bounce around all over the place, but he always voted, and it was never like straight ticket. He voted, and I remember he would, though, like when there were any bond measures on the ballot locally, he would vote for every single one, because he was like, I don't mind if they raise my taxes. I think they need to do more of this stuff. There needs to be more stuff that they're actually doing. So is there a bond to increase the quality of the roads? Yes, I'm voting for it. Like, he wouldn't. He was just very like, his political positions were very interesting, and he was very well read, very educated, very smart. And I remember that he would. I remember one time, actually, a quick funny story. He asked me when I was like 6 years old or something if I wanted to go with him to vote, and I thought he said, "Do you want to go boat?" So I was very disappointed when we pulled up to like an elementary school cafeteria. I was like, "What are we doing?" And he's
Where's
like,
the
"We're voting."
boats?
That's not as much fun. but but he, I mean, and he voted in every single damn election, every single one. He was there. He would, but he didn't ever put, he did not like putting signs up in the yard. He did not latch on to like particular candidates. And so I kind of learned through him, like, he was like, you can believe and support literally whoever you want. Like, whatever you want, whatever, as long as you feel like you have a good understanding of those positions, go for it. And in fact, one of the first things that I like got involved in before I really figured out what was going on was I thought I knew that they were trying to impeach Clinton when I was younger, and I was like, yeah, impeach Clinton, that's cool. And I remember writing to this impeach Clinton now group and saying, send me your stuff, I want to know more about impeaching Clinton. And then I don't remember where the shift happened, but I was like, no, you know what? Actually, I don't want, the worst thing in the world would be if who was it who was running against Al Gore? It was Gore, Lieberman, Bush, obviously. Oh my God, it was
I
Bush.
was about to say,
Yeah, it was
Bush.
the
I
first
don't know how
Bush. I
many
can't
times
believe I
Al
forgot
Gore
that.
ran.
It was W from Texas. I cannot believe I just forgot that. Holy cow. And I remember, like, I don't know why I don't remember supporting Gore, but I remember seeing a picture of myself around that time wearing a Gore Lieberman shirt. So I guess I
Hmm.
must have been. But I just wanted to be in the mix. Like, I just wanted to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I
And
wish I could just bottle up all of this like independent thought and actually wanting to be engaged and like give that to like everyone who listens.
I would, I think it really did help that I had, parents who were not fixed on one side politically more than the other. And like I remember, my dad voted for George W. twice, and he voted for George W. Bush for governor, but he also like loved Ann Richards, who was the governor of Texas when I was growing up. She was a Democrat. I think she was probably the last governor who was a Democrat in Texas. And
I wish I
she
was
was
Rogan.
just
I
like,
could be like Jamie. Look that up.
yeah, look that up. Yeah, yeah, look that up.
One
Jamie,
day
check that.
we'll have a larger studio.
There you go. But and she was a Spitfire. Have you heard of Ann
Oh
Richards?
no, that's before my time.
Oh, she was so, in fact, I think the reason she was so popular is that she was really damn funny. Like, I'm reading this book about Winston Churchill right now, and there are so many politicians who just hated him, hated his positions, hated him, but they'd say, but everybody shows up for his speeches because he's so good and he's so funny. And, he, even to people who he's actually insulting, the show was so good that they showed
I
up
feel
for it.
like arguably you could say that about Trump in a way.
I think like in just
He
about
just
any
memed his
other.
way to the White House in
Yeah. Oh,
16.
that's definitely a huge part of it. And I mean, and you can't manufacture that, right? Like Ann Richards had this great line when she was running against George W, where she said, and she was like, just she had like this, like, she was a kind of old lady with white curly
I'm gonna have to
hair,
look
and
her
she
up
was like,
after.
yeah, she had a real strong Texas accent. She would wear these like, really ostentatious kind of suits, and she had this really famous line at the convention in Texas where she said, "Poor George, he can't help it. He was born with a silver foot in his mouth," which is an incredible line. So
Oh,
I think it was one of those things where people in Texas appreciate somebody who's brash and like outspoken, and they like an iconoclast. And there hasn't really been, I mean, Texas politics is
oh
a
yeah.
whole nother world. But I came to just appreciate that, and my dad loved her. My dad thought she was so funny, even if he didn't like her policies. And I think a lot about what my dad would have thought about Trump, actually, because I know he would find him incredibly funny. I know my dad. He was like, he loved sarcasm, and he was a smart ass, and
Did
like,
he is he pass before Trump came on the scene?
he did. He passed away in 2012.
Oh
So
wow, I'm
he,
sorry.
there's just he was just a few years shy of the whole circus. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, just
Um,
imagine what he's thinking about all of it.
Oh my God. I can imagine like how he would have responded to Trump's the comment about Japan yesterday. Like, I know my
Right.
dad would have, because
Oh yeah, that one about like, oh, did you tell us about Pearl Harbor?
he was, yes, my dad was just, he was like very like, he just appreciated absurdity too. Like, he was like, you always have to look for the
Well,
absurd in
you know,
everything.
maybe that's a thing. I like you're. more, I mean, I don't know how you'd self-describe as either like liberal, leftist, progressive, but one thing I've noticed in terms of that is that the ability to laugh at oneself. And
Yeah.
if you can just like, laughter is the great unifier. And if you are able to laugh at yourselves and not be so uptight about everything and be like, oh yeah, that is kind of funny, that's a huge thing in political rhetoric that I think would lower the temperature.
I mean, I think so too. I really loved that moment when Zoran Mamdani was visiting the White House and they were taking questions and they asked Mamdani kind of a leading question that inviting him to say something critical of
And Trump
Trump.
was like, "It's okay. You can call me
Yes,
you can say you hate me. I don't care."
I thought that was such a revealing, interesting moment, and also just the fact that they were able to. I really like Zoran Mamdani for lots of reasons. I don't know enough about but I don't live in New York. I don't have, but I do think he's doing something really smart, which is he's saying, like, there's space for lots of different forms of political engagement. There's lots of different ways to like be a Democrat, and it's dependent often on where you are. So like what's going to work with like, Mamdani style Democratic policies in New York City obviously is not something that's going to work in like Des Moines, Iowa. And you wouldn't try that. But
Well,
like
it's always it's really a question of the Overton window, right?
yeah,
And one thing that I've mentioned is like, a far left Texas Democrat is a right wing nut job in Massachusetts,
that's
because the
absolutely true.
Overton
And
windows are just so on the opposite side of things.
yes, and I think too, the where the Overton window really shifts in a lot of ways, I think, is how movement leaders shift conversations. So it's something like it happens in real time and it has to, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it has to kind of come from the top down in some ways. But, I mean, I agree with you and I think like somebody who is, sort of like center left in the United States would be, might be like a far right, like a far right fascist person in Europe, right? So yeah, it's
Yeah.
all contextual. And there's space, I think, for a lot of different ways of being politically. But I also think that, oh gosh, it's just so interesting. Think about how different the whole picture is, even from when you and I first met. So, like when you and I first met, even then, I feel like the political landscape has just shifted so much. I think about how, I know that these might not seem immediately connected, but I've in my job, I'm having to think about AI an awful lot because
Hmm.
it's like I don't know how, in some ways I don't know how we can talk about anything else because it feels to me to be such an existential threat to a whole generation's ability to think for
It's also an
themselves.
existential threat to organically using M dashes, because I unironically
I can't
use
use them
M
anymore.
dashes in my work, but like, people will see it and be like, "Oh, you used AI." I'm like, "No, I did not." And so like,
That's
I'm just,
yes.
my attitude is, I mean, yours is, I'm not going to use them anymore. No, I'm just going to use them anyways. It's a
You know what?
humans invented the M dash. Okay, take it back. Take
Yeah,
back the
you know
power.
what? You are absolutely right. And I mean, I think that it might be that this is where I imagine like right wing not, populism of all kinds kind of coming together in a way in the next few years is in response to some of this stuff because I think it needs to be. I don't know. Gosh, I wish I knew enough to talk like from a perspective about this, but like I think I have a friend who was one of the original employees at Facebook.
Hmm.
She doesn't work there anymore, but she was one of the first salespeople at Facebook, and she was in Boston working with Mark Zuckerberg and the whole crew in 2005 or 2003 2004.
Hmm.
Moved out to Silicon Valley, continued to work in sales. Now works for Google, and she was just on this podcast. She was talking about this that she said when we were at Facebook and it was just starting, we were like this scrappy little startup. we thought we were doing something genuinely democratizing and like revolutionary, that we were going to revolutionize the way that people connected, and that it was a good and noble cause. And she said, looking back on it, though, it's like there's a tipping point where something stops being good for society and it starts being so profit driven that everybody loses sight of the humanity in what they're doing.
Hmm.
And it's hard not to see that with, and I genuinely, Jason, think this is a bipartisan issue. I
Agreed.
think that there's going to be, I hope, a huge kind of bipartisan sort of backlash to the way that AI is just feels like it's just like running roughshod through so many different industries in a way that I think is genuinely like I hear my students talk about their future in the world and whether or not there's going to be a profession that exists when they graduate. And in some ways, I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? That's how innovation works, right? Like that's capitalism. I think that capitalism does support innovation. Like, I think that's great. But then at the same time, this feels like something a little different. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like something that is just outsourcing by another name. Like, it feels like the opposite of like bringing jobs back here. It feels like something really nefarious. But I want to know what you
Yeah, well,
think. I'd
I
love
have a few
your
things
book.
about that. One of my future job avenues is AI proof because the George B. Cortelyou papers are not digitized, and I'm making special care not to feed them into ChatGPT so that
Yeah.
they won't be digitized and that my book cannot be written by AI. I was about to use the C word, the slur that they invented for AIs. Uh,
Oh yes,
yeah, clankers.
that's right.
It's
I
so
told
funny.
a couple.
They've got like a whole list of slurs that they use for artificial intelligence bots. How I think AI should be used personally is reflective of kind of how I use it in my day to day. It's one of those things about like, okay, when the atom bomb was invented, it doesn't matter, like it was possible. And so then the Russians ended up having it. Oppenheimer
Yeah,
realized this as like, I kind of opened Pandora's box. And so
yeah,
any attempt to shut down, like my brother was telling me, oh, you shouldn't use AI because of the data processing centers take up a lot of water and is bad for the environment and all of these reasons. And I said, well, it's kind of inevitable. He's like, no, it's only inevitable because people like you think it's inevitable. But I disagree. I
huh,
think it's one of those things that you can't on a widespread basis kind of put that back in the box, and
that's
you have to
true.
use it as a tool. So I deliberately will say like, okay, I'm going to send you a draft of an email. I do not want you to rewrite it. I don't want you to even give me examples because oftentimes they'll say bullet points of, oh, make this
Yeah,
tighter. For example, I'm like, don't even give me examples. Just give me a
yeah,
bullet pointed list of ways I can improve this, and it'll comply. And I've told it to challenge me, like, okay, am I wrong here? Because I'm pretty self reflective. So I'll say a statement, and, I've kind of cultivated it to gently push back and be like, hey, not so fast.
right.
And we'll always ask, like, are you sure you're not just saying that to, butter me up or anything?
Yeah,
Um, have it be a little critical. The other thing I've noticed is with all the AI slop that is out there, it's
yep,
sort of opening the floodgates of a conversation more about art. How are we defining art? Because a well-meaning person can make something good using AI. I think like the Shape Store video went viral recently because it was
yes,
kind of actually funny and somewhat controversial for different reasons. But I was listening to the John Doyle show, and one thing he was saying is that um, he was trying to make it about DEI and about how, something like the Shape Store is better than like freaking Disney Pixar movies. But also, it's a double edged sword because with AI being so available, you kind of democratize mediocrity. And that if the hands to make good art is in everyone's hands, then you can have the standout that uses AI, but then the
yeah,
vast, vast majority of it is an AI text voice being like, 10 things you should know about this. And then fake Reddit stories and saying, oh, Mrs. Rodriguez. And it always like uses the same names.
yes,
I
yeah,
mean, there was already a genre that existed prior of YouTube short form content that will reread either Reddit posts or like Tumblr threads.
Yes.
Uh, and it'll have like the Minecraft parkour background and it'll read it.
Yeah.
And actually, for your students, this is something I came across. There is called it's like brainrot.ai where you can upload like an academic document, like a dissertation, and then it'll
Uh,
turn it into one of those Minecraft parkour videos.
that's actually incredible. And you better believe I'm going to check that out later.
And
That's
I'll send you the
really
link.
funny. And I think you're right. And I think, what you say, that what you're saying though is that like the way that you interact with chatbots, for example, requires you to be nuanced and understanding of it enough to know that like it bends toward being a little bit of a sycophant. So you have to tell it, I want you to be straight with me, be real with me
I say
here,
be
right? So you're
brutally honest.
you're using it in a very, like, in a way, so I guess maybe the literacy around it is what's really going to be important. um
It's all
and
about prompt engineering.
was that,
It's all about prompt engineering.
yeah,
There's a I will say a quick aside. So Remy, my co-founder and best
yes,
friend, and myself, we've both encountered this in different ways. I would say, "Oh yeah, Charlie Kirk is dead," and it'll stop me and be like, "I'm telling you this once. Uh, uh, he is not dead. He never has been dead." And I'm like, "Okay, your training data is screwed up." And the way you have to change that is say, please verify using independent, up-to-date sources the following information,
huh,
or what happened on this. And what will happen with Remy is he'll be like, "Oh yeah, like Pope Leo the 14th," and he'll be like, "There is no Pope Leo the 14th. Who is the current Pope?" "Oh yeah, you're
and
right.
then
It's
oh yeah, you're right, yeah, that's
because
actually
it doesn't
really, that's,
use up to date training data. It's stuck in like mid 2024.
yeah,
And in order for you to get information like that, uh, you have to ask it. Like Chuck Norris, right? Chuck Norris died this
yes,
morning.
yep.
Actually, what happened is that 20 years ago, Chuck Norris died, but death only worked up the courage to tell him now. Um, but if I were to ask ChatGPT, "Oh yeah, Chuck Norris is dead. It's emotionally impacting me," it would probably be like, "Chuck Norris is still alive. He's 86 years old." And I'd have to say, "No, look it up."
Yeah, right? Yeah, yeah, R.I.P. Chuck Norris, who was like sort of an honorary, even though he's from Oklahoma, definitely an honorary Texan in everybody's hearts,
Ascended to
for
a higher
sure.
plan.
Yes, yeah, but no, you're right, and I think that, but what you're describing is like when you were talking about use up to date current sources, I'm like, oh my god, this is what I tell college writing students, and I tell them too. We've done little experiments with ChatGPT and with Claude, which everybody kind of, a lot of people say that Claude is
And
like better
Grok.
at working with more recent sources. Yeah, and Grok, that like it will and can and does, it does kind of get stuff wrong when it comes to
Well,
attribution.
yeah,
So
yeah. Like one time I was having it go through George B. Cortelli dissertations, and as far as I know, only two exist. There's one
uh
by Robin Gibbs, and there's one by Benjamin Temple Ford. Right? One
mhm.
was in Columbia University, and one was in it was like Hunter College of New York, and I had to track
Uh-huh.
that second one down. And it was saying, "Oh, there's another one at University of Chicago." And so I reached out to this thing. I'm like, "Hey, tell me that." And she was like, "Where did you get this?" I have a feeling it's like invented by AI.
Oh no.
And I
So it
felt
was just
so
making it
freaking
up.
embarrassed. It doesn't exist. The author existed,
Wow.
and the subject matter contained therein existed in a different person's dissertation, but it basically Frankenstein monstered them together and made a fake
Yeah.
citation.
Yeah,
Although
like
the one
I had
thing about Grok
no,
is,
go ahead,
you
please.
remember the trolley problem one? Have you
Oh,
seen that
yes.
with like, I pull the lever without hesitation?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So each one has
I think
different levels of good or bad, and
is
different things.
I was gonna say, is AI, is ChatGPT like a rule utilitarian? I think that would be really interesting to kind of figure out is ChatGPT a deontologist? Like, I gotta
I
know.
don't know. I just know that when asked the question, ChatGPT was like, "No, like our lives, I would save multiple lives, and I wouldn't destroy my own servers by clicking the lever." And then Grok was just like, "I pull the lever without hesitation. My job is to save humans. I'm starting with those."
Yeah. Well, you know what I always think about with AI. I've said this a few times to people this week. I was telling my friend Andrew the other night. Um, it's always fascinating to me when the fact that like two parents can have a kid who is like infinitely smarter than them, the fact that humans developed AI is absolutely incredible. Like it is an incredible achievement that AI exists and that smart, like you mentioned being in my comp class in 2022, ChatGPT debuted in 2022 and it was not great. And
Yeah.
now it is unrecognizable. You know the Will Smith eating spaghetti AI benchmark? Have you seen
No.
this? So it's
I
like
don't know.
it's a benchmark that developers use for how good AI video generation has gotten.
Hmm.
And there's a 2022 video that was supposed to be Will Smith eating spaghetti that looked absolutely nightmarish. It was not real. It was like, AI can't do hands. Well, it couldn't do anything. And it shows like there's this YouTube video that shows that benchmark and then again in 2023 and 2024 and now, and it's like virtually
Well, I
indistinguishable
mean,
from
one
reality.
time there was like picture generation, and like one of the very, very early things I screwed with, and I was trying to get it to make Donald Trump merging into like the instrument of a trumpet in like Animorph book cover style. And
Uh,
it still doesn't get what I'm trying to do, but it's still funny.
I love that idea. I love that idea. But like, yeah, there was this AI generated video of like, I don't know, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting each other with lightsabers or something that was just it was just bafflingly realistic. And so I think about how quickly that's happened and how quickly the chatbot technology has, it used to be when students turned something in that was AI generated, it was so obvious. I mean, like you said, there were like a student who never used an M dash before, all of a sudden, their papers peppered with M dashes, or it also loves to use any kind of like descriptive or modifying words. It loves to use them in threes. It just loves threes. So it'll
Oh yeah,
say,
no, it was really sad to me. I was reading Stop in the Name of God, and I could tell that AI was used because that was
yeah,
the book that was published after Charlie Kirk's death, and it was
that's
like,
right.
what we want is, uh, and I'm trying to think like, uh, it focuses on the good, the just, the beautiful, not the ugly, the profane. And I'm like, that's
Which
ChatGPT
is
and
a
that's
shame too,
ICK.
because that kind of stylistic parallelism is so effective in public speaking and in writing, but now it's like one of these AI hallmarks. And I don't care about like catching students and doing it or whatever, but I mean, now I just want to help to give them their money's worth, and to me that's not I'm not doing that if I'm accepting
Yeah, so
AI
there's a whole
writing.
different paradigm of you have to use. I would say maybe come up with an assignment and pitch it to the board or English department and be like, listen, still have that critical thought, but be using AI of like you're not using AI as a replacement, but you're using it, and I'm sure there's meaningful ways that you can get it. I mean, I saw one thing about a teacher posting a specific source about a movie that only he made, and then when they would ask ChatGPT, it would use that source, but that was the decoy. But I've been seeing so much focus on teachers coming up with elaborate ways to catch students using AI,
Yes,
and not enough about how to kind of steward and guide them towards actually not sacrificing their own independent intellect, and just lazily saying, hey, write this for me. I'm sure there's
absolutely.
ways to use it more like I have. All right.
And in fact, yes, I think so. And in fact, one of my students said the other day something I had not thought of before, but that really resonates with me, which is, if you get to a point where you can't write, a 3 sentence email without using AI, or you're not doing it, then it erodes your confidence, that it erodes your confidence in your own ability to communicate. And I think that's a real thing. I mean, I noticed that in myself. Like I would just get lazy and be like, "Hey, ChatGPT, help me write this response to this email. I don't know what to say." And I was like, "Actually, I really don't like how that feels." Like I don't like. And I was also like, "Well, I felt like I had to go back and make it actually sound like me because I don't want to send crappy
Well,
writing
yeah,
into
and
the
then I
world." And I
mean
was like, "At
that's
this point, I might as well just do it myself." But it is incredibly useful for so much stuff.
I
Like,
mean
good lord.
that's the thing. Like I had it at one point brainstorm chapter headings for my future book, and it'll be like, oh, part one, the steward of presidents, right? And what I've noticed is once the wording implement, like it's sort of like reading the book before watching a movie, where it's like with the human stuff versus whatever. If you just watch the movie, right? I watched the television series 11/22/63, and now I can't go back and read the Stephen King 11/22/63 because I would just imagine the main character as James Franco. I can't avoid that.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and so there's this the first impression vibes that you have to at least try to brainstorm a little bit as a human first. Uh,
Yes.
I want to get back to free speech real quick and kind of have a final question of proposed solutions that isn't just, oh, let's talk more. Because there's a lot
Right.
of these systematic things that are meant to divide and to separate us. And I'm curious both on college campuses, but also, New England and the nation as a whole. How can we have this rigorous debate that once existed and seems to be in decline?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. I think part of me wants to say it has to happen away from social media. But I mean, it's hard to I don't know that we could put the toothpaste back in the tube on that, but it does seem like um I mean, gosh, I will say this, I think on the local level it's happening more than ever. I think I don't have anything other than anecdotal feelings about this, but I mean, I think about the fact that you're running for office. I think there's been an increased interest in local politics, maybe because on a national level, it's just, if it's so overwhelming and there's just so little that we can do. But I feel like I see some wild city council meetings, and I think that's great. So I think getting more involved at a local level is a really good practice to get into. I think people like you, I think running for office is crucial.
That was a
Um,
Rubicon I had to cross. That was not on my bucket list at all.
yeah,
No,
is it
I had to get drafted into doing it, kind of.
really who
It
drafted you?
was my across the street neighbor's a town selectman, and
Cool.
I had pulled papers to run for library trustee, and then he was like, "Hey, you should, think a little higher." And then I get
Yep.
him, who's like far left Democrat, and then my guy on the school board who's more on the right. Both of them simultaneously saying you should run for select board. I'm like, God, no, please, please, not that. But just because I'm a reluctant leader does not mean I'm a begrudging one. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, but like I think that is and it's an excellent, and actually the fact that you have people from like two political angles trying to pull you into it speaks to my point, which is I think that those distinctions, the party distinction, and even in some ways the ideological distinction, like breaks down a little bit at that local level, right? Where you're talking about like actual policies and the best approach to actually accomplish things. And I think it's just a much more, I think, productive sort of grounds for engagement. And that's not to say that people shouldn't pay attention to what's going on at sort of the national level, but I do feel like those issues at the national level are almost by, I mean, there's something like abortion, which I honestly feel like is that now that's a Loki's wager type topic in my
yeah,
personal view. Where like even, I'll hear people debating the issue getting down to like, okay, well, what number of weeks do we think is acceptable for, it's just an impossible, it's just people are, I think, less inclined to budge on that than like almost any other issue. And then we get really entrenched in it, or we get really dug in on these sort of social issues where I think all of those social issues manifest really differently when you're talking about like your friends and neighbors. It's
yeah.
just very different. And so I think maybe like pulling ourselves away from the national picture as our only focus. Like obviously it's still good to be informed about what's going on. That's critical. But I think being more involved at the local level, running for office, availing yourself of what's happening in your town, in your state, in your area. And I don't know that has increased as much as I wish it would. But I do think that the more people feel kind of disempowered, maybe by stuff like technology and AI and stuff, maybe the more they will look toward that kind of local engagement. So I think that's really important and really critical. I think being willing to have difficult conversations and
That's a
uncomfortable
big one.
conversations is something that should be a focus in K through 12 education. I mean, I feel like that's what I mean, I feel like that's what I got, and it definitely helped me to become a more open minded person. And so I think some combination. I know I'm not giving you a super clear
No, I mean
answer, but
you've done very well by it. I think the principle is the same. Less national focus, more local and individual, and you've unintentionally reiterated the entire purpose of sort of the Keepers movement. So I appreciate that. Wyatt, thank you very much for your time and coming on the podcast. We'll have to plan another episode, maybe just to talk about AI or just to talk about one of these things. Have
I
you
would
be like a
love that.
recurring guest.
Yeah, anytime. I would love that. And in fact, like I know that you had a hard out. I completely forgot that that I needed to do something, and I'm fine with it. I'm so glad that like I looked up and I was like, we've been talking that long.
Oh
So
yeah,
I'm just delighted to. I've always enjoyed chatting with you, and whether that's been in my office over the years or on Zoom and or on here. And so I'm honored to that you decided to have me, and I would love to come back. So thank you, Jason.
absolutely.
Good luck. Good luck with your foray into government
Yeah, I
and with the
appreciate that.
podcast. Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course.
Thank you very much, and be sure to spread the signal. The signal. Peace.